Welcome to the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, where we are breaking generational curses in the Black community. Today's guest is Bisi. Bisi, can you please help me pronounce your last name, whichever one you prefer to go by?
Absolutely. My last name is Gbadamosi. The G is silent, so it's just Gbadamosi.
Lovely, Gbadamosi. Okay. And I hear that there's another last name that's coming soon. You want to share that one?
I might keep that one to myself, but yes, it is coming soon.
Awesome. Well, coming soon. All right. Well, Bisi, can I give them an introduction about you? Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect. So Bisi is a mental health counselor in Florida, specializing in women of color, Christian women, racial trauma, and faith-related trauma. Her personal connection to these areas creates a space for you to truly be seen and heard. Thank you so much, Bisi, for just that very transparent, natural human interaction. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you got into this space?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say that when a therapist is specializing in something, it's often something that they can relate to firsthand.
Yes.
And that was so true for me, especially in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. There's so much social and political unrest, and I experienced some pretty heavy trauma in my church that I'd grown up in.
Oh, wow.
And it was surrounding race. It was just after the murder of George Floyd. And when I was wrestling with the reactions of people around me, because I went to a predominantly white church, it really was kind of earth-shaking to see that people who were supposed to be brothers and sisters of mine in Christ could say such things that directly impacted my value on this earth, the value of my family members, of my friends who look like me. And it really kind of was eye-opening to the fact that this unfortunately is not a unique experience that only I have, but there are a lot of other people who are hurt in this way.
Absolutely. That's got to be the most heartbreaking experience. I mean, you're in church, and that's obviously important to you and your faith and your calling. And the people that you're supposed to be worshiping with don't seem to, it's almost like they don't see you.
Right. That's almost exactly what it felt like. Or almost as if I was the exception.
Yes.
But everybody who looked like me didn't matter.
Correct. I'm not even going to ask you what they said. I want to know, but I don't even want to dignify it because I can imagine. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. But the beautiful thing about you, and like you said, most of us who come into this, that's what makes us good at what we do. So it sounds like you've chosen now to jump in a space where we want to break the stigma of mental health in the Black community and really just relate to people on that level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So do you mind telling us a little bit about what you do now?
Yeah. So when that had happened to me, I was still in graduate school. So now I am on the other side of that, and I am getting to work with clients one-on-one. And a lot of what I do with those one-on-one clients is helping them either reconnect with some of their cultural roots and kind of see the beauty and the power behind it, or process some of the trauma they may have experienced when it comes to their identity, and help them to not let that be the story of who they are. And then outside of my one-to-one therapy, I also am pretty big on helping the conversation of mental health be more widespread. I'm really big on ending the stigma around that. I don't want it to be a hush-hush conversation that we only talk about in the house, I see the power of it, and it is part of our health, and helping people recognize that and feel safe engaging with that conversation, talking about what they're wrestling with, and being vulnerable is really where my heart is.
That's nice. That's awesome. That is super, super awesome. You shared with me before we started. I'm just curious, are you comfortable sharing with the population that you're working with now?
Yeah. So I mainly see women, particularly women of color or Christian women. And so that comes with some of its own hurdles in the sense that they often feel as if they have to carry it all on their shoulders in silence, and that they have to move through life in a certain way, and that if they are to fall off the expected path or to struggle at all, that they are doing something wrong. And so that is something I really try to help them see that is not true. It is not who they are. They are more than just what they can do to serve other people, and to help them really just bloom into their full potential of who they were created to be. So not about redesigning themselves to fit a certain mold, but to look within and see what's there and bring that to the forefront.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So, what do you wish that these women knew about themselves, or the Black community in general just knew about the stigma of mental health?
Yeah, I wish they knew that they weren't alone. I feel as though the stigma of mental health has isolated a lot of people, and a lot of people are suffering in silence because of it, which is heartbreaking, because if someone were to break their leg and need to be in a cast or in a wheelchair, we would all rally around them so quickly to help them. But if someone's hurting in their heart or in their brain, we dismiss them. But that's still part of their health.
And if they would get that part of that health under check, that might even prevent being in a wheelchair. Like, there's so much connection between your mental health and your physical health. It'll help somebody who's having a physical heartache, but not a mental or psychological heartache. And we don't understand like the correlation between heart disease, cancer. I mean, a lot of this stuff is stress.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We use I hear the word stigma all the time, and I'm trying to like make it make sense, because when I was growing up, I didn't know that there was a stigma against mental health, but I didn't know a lot of people who were invested in mental health, which probably means that is a stigma. You know what I mean? So can you tell us a little bit more about what a stigma looks like, so that people who might also be going through something like that can kind of say, oh, this is the stigma. This is why mental health and wellness is not promoted in my community.
Yeah, I would kind of break it down to the idea that there's also a physical aspect to stigma. It's something that you can sense within you. Like, if you are able to sense, like, oh, when this conversation's brought up, the vibes are changing. Like, people are more standoffish. The conversation ends really quickly, or they get defensive when it's brought up. That's a way you may be able to sense that there's some stigma surrounding something particular. And then look at the language around the conversation. So if someone were to bring up someone struggling mentally, do they get labeled as crazy or someone who needs help in a sense that is judgmental? What terms are they using? What is their tone? And so it's not always very clear and in your face that something is taboo,
right?
But you are able to sense it if you're looking for the right things, or if you're checking in on yourself. And that's something I think people miss.
You were so head on, because as you started giving those descriptions, I remember saying I had to be maybe 8, and I said I'm depressed. I don't even know if I knew what depressed was, but I had learned that word and said, oh my God, I think I'm depressed. And one of my aunts says, oh, you're too young to be depressed. What do you know about it? That's a stigma, right?
Yeah.
And it put in my head at a very early age, okay, well, you can't tell anybody. I really probably was not clinically depressed. I don't know, I might have been, but I was sad. I was unhappy in that moment. But I learned that it wasn't okay to be sad or unhappy, or at least definitely not to communicate it. So good, thank you. So for people who are listening, did any of that resonate with you? Because it certainly did with me. Where do you see then Black families struggling, and Christian families struggling the most around the stigma?
Yeah. I would say a lot of it likely breeds from uncertainty of what to do with it when the information is handed to you, that someone you love and someone that you're providing for is struggling in a way that you don't understand. And unfortunately, that ends up presenting itself as a closing off. You know, you don't talk about it, you keep it to yourself, you don't ask for help. And it's created this generational cycle of not reaching out for the help when you need it, or not knowing how to verbalize what's happening to you when you're feeling it. And so that's not to say that people aren't experiencing it. It's just that they're keeping it so tight within their chest that they are essentially poisoning themselves. Like, they're keeping the toxin in and not knowing where to find an outlet for help.
I love that you said in your chest and use the word toxic, because we're so disconnected. We're acting like there's this mental part of us and then there's this physical part of us, totally missing the interconnectedness of them. It's so true. Yeah. What advice would you give someone who is wanting to kind of try this thing out called therapy, but is a part of this environment that you're talking about? You know, probably can't really tell anybody that they're doing it, probably feeling shame and embarrassment on their own. How could you prepare them and talk with them about that?
Yeah. I would say that although the pandemic was very, very painful and very detrimental in a lot of ways, one beautiful thing that did come from that time was more access to things via the internet. And so maybe it starts by looking at some clinicians on even Instagram or YouTube and kind of just hearing some of the basics that they're sharing. And see if you resonate with that. And then even looking online to see if there are therapists available in your area who you feel like you may be able to relate to. And so even just doing that first step of the research is a huge step in the right direction of getting some of that help and that knowledge and healing that could be really incredible for your life.
Yeah, I remember, when I first got my first therapist, it was not a good fit. In fact, I just recently got triggered by it. She had recommended that I did something with a family member that I had an issue with a family member. It was causing me a lot of stress. She made a recommendation. It was like the worst thing ever, but I trusted her because she was my psychologist. So I couldn't help but say, think about back then, we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have, I don't even know if we had psychology today. If we did, I didn't know anything about it. So, it's important to kind of do your research first. A lot of times you can get an idea of who the person is just by the way that they present themselves, show up online. So, yeah, that's good. Yeah. So shows like this, she said, we have tons. We've interviewed probably 50 therapists. So, and our directory has a good 100 therapists up there. So I think we're over 100 now. So definitely we're making ourselves out noticeable. We're getting out there. We want to help. So thank you, Bisi, for that. What are some resources? So there's therapy, which is great. We love it. We want to break the stigma, but we also know that there's a variety of reasons people can't get into therapy. It could be financial, it could be accessibility, they can't travel or they don't maybe have access to the internet, they just still aren't there yet. Are there some other resources, wellness resources that you would recommend as, maybe not a replacement for therapy, because nothing can replace therapy, but there are other things that can help. But
I would say that thankfully there are a lot of therapists who are also authors and who've created really incredible books. Yeah, I'm talking to them right now.
Yes.
So it doesn't even need to be you taking the step of going to someone who can hear your story one-to-one, but just learning the idea of just getting familiar with the language of mental health. Do you know what depression is? Do you know what anxiety is?
Yeah.
And so there are books, there are podcasts like this one, there are resources that are free and are available in a variety of materials that should be used and encouraged to be worked through.
Yeah, very good. Bisi, so we vaguely talked about this, but I think this is very, very important to make sure we address. There's the stigma in the Black community, but there's also the stigma in the church. And then there's the stigma in the Black church, which is probably the most precise. Where do we start with that?
I unfortunately, I think a big root of that is pride sometimes. People don't like hearing that they don't have the skills to be able to help with that. And so sometimes if you're having a conversation with a church auntie and she's like, oh, baby, just pray about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a comfortable relationship with the church auntie, you know that praying is a helpful tool already. And so you've likely tried that.
Mm-hmm.
And you accidentally be dismissive of people who are asking for help. And I think by being able to humble ourselves and say, I don't really know how to help you with this, but I will walk alongside you as you keep looking for resources. I will help you in that area. I will continue to pray for you, but I see that there is more that needs to be done that I can't do, and I'm okay with helping you in that journey.
Love it. So when you say it's pride, then at first I thought you were talking about the church member, but are you talking about the pastor?
Both. So I would say that it is honestly a trickle-down effect. There are pastors who would say to just pray about it, or who say that pastoral counseling is the only counseling you need, and that's not necessarily always the case. And so, unfortunately, some people may take offense to them not having the right skills to work through what needs to be worked through. But I think it's this misplaced either fear or uncertainty, like I mentioned before, that's unfortunately being directed towards mental health and the people who have the struggles, instead of recognizing that we have not done a good job to serve this need yet.
Yeah. I mean, just based off of your example, I wonder if a church member went up to a pastor and says, well, I have stage 4 cancer. I would wonder if they would respond, oh, well, we're just going to pray about this. We're going to pray, but we want to know if you're seeing the doctor, if you're keeping up with your treatments. Are you in chemo, radiation? What do we need to pray about so that the expert, we're going to pray that the expert, you get a doctor who is competent, who is, knows what he's doing, is motivated to help you, has the resources and the desire, those are the things that we pray about. So, yeah, it's important. It's really important. You mentioned your own experience with the George Floyd incident in your primarily white church. Did I hear that correctly? It was a primarily white church. And because I actually had a pastor, not my personal pastor, so please, no, I'm not saying that, but I did hear even a Black pastor who was, sometimes I think even our community, we feel obligated to kind of ride the fence on conversations, because this particular pastor's perspective was, basically aligning with he shouldn't have, been out there. And no, oh, wait a minute, I'm thinking of, who was the kid? Oh my God. The kid with the Skittles in the...
Trayvon Martin. Yeah, I grew up near him. Yeah.
So it's a shame that I can't even get the case right, but yeah. Yes. And
there's so many.
There's so many. That's the point. You can't even remember the names, but I just remember being disgusted with that, and I was like, what would make you say that? You have an obligation more so to align with your community because of your position of power, and you're just totally missing the mark. So yeah, and I just can't imagine what it would be like to go to someone like that, counseling, with this issue.
Right. And I think that speaks to a systemic problem that we have as well. If the story that we've been told in so many areas of our lives is that we are at fault or we are the problem, we start to internalize it regardless of whether it's true or not. And when we do internalize that, it shows up in our actions. It shows up in the way we talk to people, and it shows up in the language we use. And so it really is a both and scenario where we have to do the work for ourselves, but also want our society to do better too.
And Bisi, I don't know if you feel comfortable going back this far, but what we're talking about, we said generationally, I mean, we say that, we don't really need to, that's not really necessary, but there was a time where it was necessary. Like if you didn't figure out what you were doing wrong, that could mean that you were wrong according to their rules, but nonetheless, it's their rules and they got the power, and, you could be hung from that tree. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And, even today, like I would say that in the Black community, especially if you have a young man who's starting to drive a car at 16, if you don't have that talk with him about how to deal with the white police officers, or police officers, they don't have to be white.
Right.
I ain't gonna talk about the case that we just saw, but they don't have to be white, So that's still wrong. Like you're not preparing, even though I get you shouldn't have to, but you do. Okay. 2023, yes, we still talking to our Black boys about how to approach authority because they can get shot.
Yeah, I briefly mentioned I grew up 20 minutes away from Trayvon Martin, and
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I remember my mom sitting my brothers down. They were 10 and 12 years old, getting the talk already about it doesn't matter if you're driving anymore. You could be walking out of a store, and your looks is a threat to some people. Not your character, but just the way you look is a threat to some people.
I remember when that case broke, I was working in a hospital, all white people. I mean, it was disgusting. It was absolutely disgusting. But I just remember the excuses and stuff, like you said, that they were making. And, I don't want to dignify it, but, I just remember one of the people saying that he should have stopped. He should have just listened to what they were saying. And I'm like, first of all, who is this guy to be thinking that he can just stop people and, that you got to listen? But second of all, I'm like, this dude was 17. No 17-year-old listens. You know what I mean? Like, they're all rebellious. They all, whatever. So it just, and I even asked him, I said, well, were you listening to everything somebody told you to do at 17? He's like, well, no. And I'm like, well, why do you think this kid would be doing that? Especially to somebody who he doesn't have to listen to. It's just crazy. They say anything to defend why it's okay to execute a Black man in cold-blooded murder, basically.
And to speak on the generational aspect that you mentioned, a big thing that I work with people to help them understand is that a lot of what we do today did protect and save our lives. They were there.
We needed that. Yes, you had to know how to. Yes, but continue. I can't wait to.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we do need to honor that, but we also have to recognize that somewhere along the way we stopped explaining the reasoning behind why we do certain things, and we've kind of gotten dismissive. But also the way that those things were protecting us can now unintentionally harm us.
Absolutely.
And so things like not asking for help, especially in instances of child abuse, you're taught like not to talk about it to your teachers. Don't tell anybody what's going on. And unfortunately, that puts a lot of pressure on that child, and it keeps them in the environment that is not safe.
While also putting them at risk for being in another environment that's not safe.
Yeah.
Because our system is severely flawed. I mean, seriously, we don't hear a lot of good stories. I mean, not to minimize what you say, I'm just saying this is how deep the problem is. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, Yeah. So, I mean, what can we do? I don't want it to sound like this helpless, scenario. Like, how do we, I mean, I know you're doing your part in terms of just educating and letting people know. I met you on Instagram, by the way. Do you mind dropping your Instagram handle for people who want to find what you're doing?
Absolutely. It is blooming with Bisi across all social media platforms. You can find me there.
Okay, good. So you're putting out great content, bringing awareness to this issue. Can we talk a little bit more? Can you give an example of something that was useful 200 years ago in terms of turning the blind eye to, or playing by their rules, and survival, why we might not need to do it today? You gave one, but I want another one. You just said
I would say the phrase "stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about."
Ooh, Lord, I use that one. What's wrong with that?
It's so natural, but if we're saying it to children who don't have emotional regulation skills and who've only been on this earth 5, 6, 7, 8 years, this is probably life altering for them in the moment, right?
You're absolutely right. If my daughter don't have like her clothes like matching and stuff at school, you would think it's like World War III up in here.
Right.
And that really is a big deal for her. I had to come to terms with that myself. Like, that's huge, Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And I think.
So what would you recommend? What would be, because that's such an old school. I'm not gonna that, and I brought you in this world. I'll take you out. I didn't even know that was wrong to say that. I ain't gonna lie. So what are some?
That's okay. I think the important part is asking the questions, and I would say being able to, if you do say it, being able to apologize, and then sit with them and ask, well, what's this feeling for you? Like, well, what is happening inside of you? Why is this so overwhelming for you? And even just say, I don't get it. Like, this would not be that big of a deal for me right now, but I see it's hurting you, so tell me about it. And it helps the child to know, like, you are safe to go to with big feelings. I will one day understand that was an overreaction, okay. But at least I know that no matter what I'm feeling, my mom or my dad or my auntie or uncle is a safe person to bring those feelings to.
What about when it goes, just curious, too far? Because, like, for instance, one of the things recently, we had a birthday party for my daughter and we were having a sleepover. Obviously, I can't invite 30 people from her class over. So I won't say she got in trouble, but it was a little awkward to be able to give the invitations to the 7 people that we invited, because there's 20 something people who are left out, and it's this mindset of overindulgence almost. Like, we feel like we have to, and I know this is kind of going a little bit off, but I really want to give a balanced view of this. When we make a child feel like because the real world is not going to care if you're upset all the time, right? So yes, I know as mommy I have to be way more sensitive and caring and compassionate, but I don't want to give this false narrative like you can just cry at the drop of the dime either, or you're going to be invited to all the birthday parties, because you might not, and so, and
I think that's where the conversation afterwards is so important. You may have any reaction in the moment, but if you're able to take a step back and go, okay, I messed up, yet this is still something that is a rule for us. This is still something I need you to learn. And so you're still the adult in this scenario. What your final decision is still what's going to be the decision. But I think somewhere along the way, we forgot that the kids have no frame of reference to why things are happening. And so being able to give them space for that, and then also helping them know that ultimately you're not always going to get this. I think that's where that safety aspect comes in. And I think it could be easy to slip into the trap of coddling people. But if you were to take a step back and ask yourself, if I needed this explained to me, what would have helped me? And then giving that to others as well. It won't always be a perfect fit, but doing the best you can and actually engaging in the conversation will always be seen in some way versus just completely shutting down and being like, this is my answer, you don't get an explanation. There's a time and place for that if you've had the conversation over and over, but to at least give them a chance to understand is something that's really important.
I love that. So it's like we can always get it right. Like, even if we can't do it right in the moment, we can always go back and revisit it. So I think when you say that, then we need to talk about, because sometimes we can get so overwhelmed with everything that we just let the conversation go. What types of things, because I've noticed like the more I journal, the more I pray, the more I meditate, things like that, the more present I am. So I can remember if something like that happens on the way to school in the morning, when I go pick my daughter up in the evening, I can say, you know what, let's talk about it this morning, you know? And that's a lot easier to do when I'm doing those things versus when I'm not staying intentional about my mental health. I'll forget to revisit it. And so then she'll, you know, we don't get those conversations. So are there some tools and tricks that you might have that helps us to be more present so we can do stuff like that?
Yeah, and I would also say that we are human, and so we will never get everything right 100%. But I always like to remind both myself and my clients who are parents that you being dysregulated is not going to regulate your child. So if it's between regulating them and regulating you, take a break and regulate yourself.
Got it. Love that. And especially for us Black women, because we don't now that one we don't do. We just think we have to work. And yeah. And I've been guilty of that too. So thank you for reading that. Yeah, sharing that. What types of anything you listen to or read, like a podcast or a book or whatever, that can kind of help bring some of these principles together for our audience?
Yeah. Not every. I just started last year doing a Black History Month book club. This year I did My Grandmother's Hands.
What book club is that?
A Black History Month book club. And so I will select a book each year for us to go through about different aspects of Blackness and both bringing in the history and the present day situation. This year I did My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem, and that integrated both police brutality and Black culture and generational trauma, and it had resources for both exercises and it was history, and so that one I found really helpful. I'm in the process of reading Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome.
Yes. You know what? Yes. Love it. Okay.
And then
how is it?
I gotta take breaks sometimes.
Yeah.
But sometimes I just see a little bit of too much of myself. I'm not always looking for it. And so that's something that's important too, is you don't have to do it all in a day.
No. How do you read? Do you read actual books or do you do audio books?
So when I am reading it for the first time, I like to have the physical book so I can jot notes and do tags and stuff. If I am reviewing it for either a series or for a certain client, I will do an audiobook afterwards.
Okay, nice. Yeah. Good. Okay, and I like to clarify that because so many people say things like, well, I don't have time to read or stuff like that. And I'm like, yes, you do. You know, I will put on a headset. I don't have a lot of time, like you're saying, to actually have the physical book, but I will put on a headset in a heartbeat and listen to it when I'm showering, or listen to it, put on my Bluetooth while I'm driving my children to school. I mean, that's like an hour and a half right there, twice a day that I can consume information. So I get through my books pretty quickly just doing stuff like that. So we make time for what's important for us. So is there any myth about the stigma of mental health or just mental health in general that you'd like to debunk for our listeners today?
Yeah. I get this one a lot. I hear so often that therapy is just for white people.
Uh-huh.
And that one is kind of like a double-edged sword because in the past it has been, we were not in mind when they were creating resources or assessments or even definitions for diagnoses. But that
the term right now, but there was a diagnosis given to slaves who were rebellious. Like if you didn't be a slave, that was a mental illness, and they would, treat you as such. Yeah.
And then I think they changed, like when they stopped using that term, they switched in schizophrenia for a lot of Black males.
Everybody, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But and so although that has been true for a long time, that we were not created in mind, there is still such a wealth of healing that is found in therapy and mental health. And so we are deserving of that too. We are deserving of that healing. And so maybe that looks like we have to take maybe an extra minute or two to look for culturally competent therapists and clinicians. It's worth it to take that extra minute because that healing that we can get, we deserve it too.
Absolutely. And there are a number of them. Like I said, we've got them on our website, but one of the things that I've enjoyed is listening to how these therapists are taking these Eurocentric principles and changing them. In fact, one, I'm not sure when Dr. Love Coop is going to be featured, but if she hasn't been featured yet, look for her in our list. But she had explained that Freud, the father of psychology, and Carl Jung, these are really big. I mean, you know who they are, but for the people who are listening to us, these are really big psychologists and philosophers that have shaped the field of psychology. They went to Africa to get this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like they went to our people to get the framework and then came back and, and of course they get the credit for it. But
they pointed at their own.
Yeah. But I just think it's amazing that, but anyway, so is life. Well, I don't know. Is there anything that you want to add that we kind of just haven't touched? If there's just like one thing that you wanted to make sure our Black families knew, what would that be?
Yeah, I would say at least start small. So you don't have to go rushing to schedule an appointment with the top psychologist in your state. But even if it's just 10 minutes Googling something, that is a huge, huge step in bringing in that healing to yourself and your family and the generations to come after you. You don't always know how one decision in the right way can have an earth-shattering impact, but starting small is better than not starting at all.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, we're coming up on a part in the show called What's Good. And What's Good is just where I give a hypothetical scenario about a fake client. And I want you to kind of give me some feedback on to how to proceed.
Okay.
So meet Chester. Chester is a 40-year-old Black man who is married and with one child. They are uncovering some marital problems, particularly surrounding money, and Chester recognizes that he's not necessarily happy in his marriage, but does not feel comfortable getting a therapist, has never had a therapist, didn't grow up in an environment where a therapist was encouraged. What would you recommend for Chester?
Yeah. I would recommend that Chester starts with some free materials online about what therapy looks like, what it could look like for Black men, what it can do for relationships, like looking at some of the benefits of it, and kind of just looking at some quick videos of clinicians sharing what it is that they do, and then start working his way up. If he decides he would like to do therapy, that's wonderful. But if for now all he feels like he would like to do is just to start learning, that's still a big step.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, all right. I think that's all we have. So, Bisi, I just think that I just want to say thank you for your work and your commitment to this very important cause. I'm not sure if you, from a working perspective, can do like international stuff, but at the very least, I want people to have access to you online. So, other than your Instagram handles, are there other places that people can find you?
Yes, I am on YouTube. I post new videos every Saturday.
Oh,
I have a Facebook group for women who are working through generational trauma. It's an empowerment group, so I'm not doing therapy.
Good. Give me both of the give me your YouTube and your Facebook.
Yeah.
And make sure you send those to me so I can put them in the show notes.
I will. So the YouTube is also Blooming with Bisi, like my other social media. And then the Facebook group is called, let me pull it up so I don't
I'm like that too. I forget.
It's a long one.
Okay.
Generational Trauma Empowerment Group for Women. So this is a women's only group, but it is a private group, so you don't have to worry about anyone seeing your comments in their feed.
Yeah.
But it's just a chance to learn about generational trauma and to grow with other women through community and discussion.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. So there you have it. This is how you can meet Miss Bisi. She is doing amazing work. She's working with those who have been traumatized. She's breaking down stigmas in the Black community, and she's just doing her thing. So we want to thank you. We want to thank her, rather, for coming to the show and just sharing some of the awesome stuff that she's doing with us. Thank you, Bisi.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. All right, everybody, that concludes our show for today. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for allowing us to join you on your journey to a healthy lifestyle and breaking generational curses in the Black community. Peace and blessings, Dr. O. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, where we connect Black families to Black therapists. Since you've listened all the way through, come on in and join the family. If you haven't done so yet, please join our free community where we offer weekly trainings and monthly giveaways. We can be found on Facebook under the Black Marriage and Families Matter Facebook group. And since you're serious about joining our family, we also invite you to join our All In campaign, which signifies your commitment to go all in, not only for yourself, but in helping us reach more people by downloading this podcast wherever you are listening to it, leaving us a review, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. This really helps us reach more people and change more lives. After all, Dr. Martin Luther King once said, we can all get more done together than we can apart. With that said, I want to encourage you to share this episode with just 3 other people who you think might also benefit from our community and what we are offering, with the hopes that all of you can join our All In campaign. When you're done, simply click the link All In campaign in the bio and receive a free copy of my course entitled Goodbye Toxicity, which is valued at $297. This course will help you to work through some of the difficult experiences that arise in most of our relationships, and it's completely free to you with your commitment to join our All In campaign. We look forward to connecting with you every Monday and Wednesday. Thanks for listening.